what happens to us and how we are wounded drives us. Like it gives us a void that we seek to heal. We seek to do something about. And so we have a value and a void, and that drives us.
Welcome back to the Missoula podcast. Brandon, good to see you this morning, my man.
Stephen Russett, always good to see you.
All right, Dylan Spradlin, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Dylan, where did you grow up, and what's something about your childhood that you find interesting?
I grew up in Seattle, and I think it's interesting that my parents were really good parents.
That is rare.
It's very, very rare. I mean, there was some stuff I needed to work out with my mom, but that's pretty normal. But everybody loved my dad and everybody loved my mom. And my sister and I still agree that we had the best parents in the world. And they're both gone now, which sucks. But yeah, we had a pretty play-forward childhood, and we did a lot of camping, and we did not have a lot of money. My parents were both in educators. My mom was a teacher, and well, they were both started out as teachers, but as we were growing up, my mom was a teacher and my dad was a vice principal of the high school I went to, which was fine. There was one thing a story I tell a lot. It was a big, huge high school, 3,000 students. So I didn't know everybody. And this one girl came up to me in the hallway once. "Are you Mr. Trefethen's daughter?" And I said, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh my God, he just suspended me, but he was so nice about it."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So he was fair.
He was totally fair, and he's very respectful. And yeah, it was really good. Good growing up.
Good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Dylan, I was just going to say, you said your parents didn't have a lot of money. Obviously, educators pay teachers more.
Yes, please.
But when you say they were like good, like unpack that a little bit more for us. Why were they so good? What did they do that was so awesome for you and your sister?
They were very respectful. I mean, there was some, my mom grew up in a very abusive childhood herself. And so she was the cycle breaker in her family. So she did not pass on a lot of that to us. She did pass on some. There were some cocktail glasses that got thrown when she got mad. And there, I was a caretaker of her emotions. So there was some of that I had to undo. That said, they negotiated the rules in the house when we were teenagers. They had firm boundaries, but they were not rigid. They respected us and our autonomy and our agency. They let us go do what we like. I'm Gen X, right? So we had the ability to go play and go run out in the street and do our thing and come back when the street lights turn on. So we weren't overprotected. My dad was he really wanted to experience nature. They taught us about prejudice and racism really young. There was not a lot of education back then like there is now, but we went to a multicultural school intentionally because they wanted us to experience diversity. And so we went camping. We learned about different cultures. He was the ESL vice principal in the public schools, different high schools since we were little. So his job was to welcome in the students that were just landing. They were refugees from Cambodia, from Japan, from Vietnam, so back in the 70s when Khmer Rouge was happening, I didn't know all that was going on. I was little, but they were so genuinely thankful for him that they would invite him and his family over for dinner. And so I was going to these families' houses and eating their food and getting exposed. These people didn't speak any English. So getting exposed to a lot of different cultures. And that was how we grew up. We had a neighborhood full of kids that we ran around like packs, multiple ages, like bikes and everything. And then this one family moved in next door from Taiwan. And my sister and I just went over and befriended their family without a second thought. And then the rest of the kids in the neighborhood shunned us because we were friends with them. So both shunned them and us. And my parents talked to us about racism for the first time and what that meant and what they experienced all the time and what we were experiencing because of that. Mm. And I was 6 years old. Wow. And so they were very kind. They volunteered. They had a faith that was a very liberal faith, but they believed that their marriage was, I don't know how to explain it, but how they explained it to us was that their marriage was a triangle. It was their love, each of them, and God. And so we went to this very liberal church and grew up in Sunday school. And I don't remember that as a big part of me. I'm not very religious now, but how they brought that into our family with care and love and playfulness. They were really goofy. My dad and mom were so silly and goofy and affectionate, and it was just fun. We had fun. The rules were, I don't remember my dad ever yelling at me. He would guilt trip, like if we didn't do the chore that we said we were going to do and it wasn't done, he would just say, okay, well, I guess I'll do it. I'm like, no, I'll get it done. And yeah, so that there was structure, there was nurture, and a good balance, I think.
And a lot of that sounds like shaped who you are.
Yeah.
And who you are today. And we'll come back to that. So you went to the same high school. Your dad was the vice principal. I was going to say vice president, vice principal at.
Yeah.
Where did life take you post high school?
After I graduated, I actually went. I had a dream of going to England and Wales, and so I spent the money that they had saved up for me to go to college, and they let me use that to take that trip. And I found through friends of mine, a contact to go and meet there. And I had a base, but then I went off and took a backpack and just went youth hosteling around UK.
What was yourself?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And they let me do that.
What was it about England or the UK that drew you?
A series of books that I read as a kid and read every year, still do. This is the Dark is Rising series of books. It's a fantasy, old English mythology. A tattoo on my arm.
Wow.
Fangirl.
And the weather obviously was very similar to Seattle, so that was no big deal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Love the weather. No.
Well, as you think back on that experience, what were some of the threads or lessons that you learned from that time?
From going to the UK, that I got really lonely. And that I could do it, that I was independent, and that I could have a goal and a dream and enact it. That I think that was the main thing, that I could make something happen and go do a thing, meet people and travel and see places. There was some things I didn't do because I was too scared when I was there to do by myself, and then regretted it when I got back. So I ended up going back again and doing them with my husband when we had our honeymoon in 2015. So I was like, come on, we're doing it again.
At what point did you decide to come home from the UK? Did you run out of money?
That's an interesting story, actually. There was a a family from our church where the dad was taking a sabbatical in England. He was taking 6 months or a year or something. And they were going to be in England, and then they were going to France and Italy and Spain. And so they arranged with me to meet up with them in England after my trip was done. I was going to be there for 4 months. And then I was going to meet up with them and be with them for the rest of the time to take care of their kids while they were there. I was like, great, extend my trip another, 2.5 months. And so I did that. And after I was with them for a month in England and then 2 weeks in France and 2 weeks in Italy, I did not like that family. They said things at the table with their little 3-year-old that they think that the dad said he wished the kids could just go into concentration camps from the age of 2 to 21. And they spanked their kids, and I felt like I was 18 and I knew more about raising kids than they did. I'd always babysat. I'd always been around kids. And I had no authority to tell them how to parent their kids, but it made me sick to be around them. And I was so homesick by then. And how they were with their kids was so different from how I was used to being with my family and with kids and with my family and how I knew how to be with kids, that it was just horrible.
How long were you over there?
For a total of like 6.5 months.
6.5 months. So
yeah.
What'd you do when you came back? What life looked like when you got back? Did you go back to Seattle?
I did. I actually arranged to come back early, and I arranged with my friends to surprise my parents that I was coming back early. And so they picked me up at the airport and brought me home. And they had told my parents that they knew I was coming back in 2 weeks, but I came back 2 weeks early. So they told my parents they were coming in to like put up posters to welcome me back, but I came in with them, and my parents didn't notice that I was in this bunch of kids. And then they started like looking like, wait a second, what's going on here? So that was fun. And then we went to a Billy Joel concert that they bought me tickets for because I was there back in time. And then I got a nanny job, and I nannied for a year, and then I went to college at Evergreen State College.
Growing up, did you see yourself going into education? Did you want to be like mom and dad? What did you hope your future looked like as a child?
Well, it wasn't until I was about 14 that I realized not all jobs got the summer off. So for a brief sliver of time, I decided, I definitely want to be some kind of teacher because, oh my God, I have to have the summer off. But then, no, I'm not a teacher. In my early 20s, I started, during my time at Evergreen, I got interested in prenatal and perinatal psychology, which we'll go into. But I started my own personal growth in my own healing, my own therapy. I didn't think I needed any. I had the perfect family, so I'm fine. But I got interested in that. And part of that, I did an internship, and part of the internship was requiring me to be part of a therapy group. So as part of that, I realized, I do have some stuff to work on. And I got interested and passionate about personal growth. And through that, I decided I wanted to be a therapist. And as I did my training, I fell in love with play therapy. And I had grown up in a family that valued play. And one of the things I didn't mention is that my parents worked with their best friends, incidentally, the drummer for the presidents of the United States, drummer Jason Finn, his parents were. So I grew up with Jason Finn. And the two couples, they worked together to develop an alternative school because they didn't have a school that they wanted their kids to go to. And so that school became Alternative Education 2, AE2, that still operates in Seattle. So they developed this program for us that was very interest-based, so kids could choose what they wanted to do. And so sort of like a interest-driven curriculum. so that we went there.
Which was very unique.
It was very unique.
And still very unique.
Still very unique. We went there until we transferred to the multicultural school, which had just started in the south end of Seattle. And when that started, my dad was like, oh, no, we want you to go there, which was also very alternative.
Dylan, you mentioned play therapy. I want to hit pause. I want to come back to that.
Okay.
Let's go to our rapid fire questions here. Sure. A little bit about Missoula. Dylan, what was your first initial memory of Missoula, Montana?
Okay, so there's two. I don't know which one you want, or maybe both.
I want both.
Okay.
Let's go both.
So the first time I ever came to Missoula was probably 27 years ago with my first husband when my daughter was a toddler. And we were on a road trip drive through western Montana, and then we dipped down into Wyoming to go to the Sacred Medicine Wheel. Then we came back through Yellowstone and up through Missoula. And the only thing I really remember was we went to the Black Dog Cafe, and I loved it so much I got a t-shirt, and I wore that t-shirt until it wore out. That's what I remember. And then I didn't ever come back to Montana until I met my now husband. And he brought me to meet his family. And the standout thing was the carousel. So
the carousel was a big deal when it first came to Missoula.
Yeah, it was a big deal. So we didn't live here at that point. We were just coming back to visit his family.
What is your go-to coffee shop here in Missoula?
Before I stopped drinking coffee, it was Drum. It was always Drum or Clyde.
Favorite restaurant?
Boy, I wish Burn Street Bistro didn't close. I'm glad Sushi Hana, now just Hana, is open again. But I just went to Basil. I don't know how it's pronounced for the first time. It's down on Hagen Street, and it's got bone broth and all natural ingredients and salads. I have acid reflux and GERD. So I have to be really careful what I eat now. So it's really hard to find places. So I think I'm in love with Basil. I don't know how to pronounce it.
We'll go with both. It's Basil.
So I'm going to go with that one. That's my new favorite.
Basil. That's a great
Basil.
Basil.
But Hana is my out to dinner place.
I hope they succeed in that new location. They're kind of hidden off the grid.
Yeah, well, they're right on Higgins, but it's small.
Yeah.
So go there so they stay.
What zip code do you live in?
08.
59808. What to use the weirdest part of Missoula?
Weird, like, would it be weird for other people to come here or weird for me to get used to?
Either. I'll let you take it where you want to go. However you want to define it.
It's very white.
Very white.
It's very white here. I'm used to lots of diversity, man. There's white people everywhere.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Even like I lived in Wenatchee for 13 years before coming here, and it's 33% Latino. Like, it's so white here.
What do you love most about Missoula?
The library. I was like, it was the world's best library in 2022. You guys know that?
No.
Oh my gosh. So the new library was built during the pandemic. And so I was a nanny during that time. During the pandemic, I was going back to school for my second master's degree during the pandemic, but I was a nanny during that time. And, so I was going all over town with this little kid, and I was at the old library before the pandemic hit all the time. Loved it. So the new library is being built. So excited. So it got put on the list and was a finalist with, I think, Latvia, Denmark, and Saudi Arabia. And they had to go to Dublin to pick up the award, and it won World's Best in 2022. But the second floor of the library's got it's got the waterworks and the Spectrum Discovery area and Families First, and they bring in all sorts of guests for that big area for groups, Animal Wonders and the dog training people. We went to go see an event where the guy came in and showed the dog training, but the fourth floor that overlooks everything and art exhibits up there, and
Architecturally,
Oh my God, it's just
building.
wonderful. I can just go in there and everything in me settles.
Mm.
Part of me wants to work there. Like a while, I was just like, can you guys hire a social worker? Can I just be a social worker in the library? And they just didn't have the funding for it. But then I was like, no, I want to be a private practice anyway. But I love it. I love it there.
Have you read or what's the book that's made the biggest impact on your life? Book that you've read.
Well,
Speaking of library,
I already mentioned the Dark is Rising series. So
I mean, if you have a tattoo of it, then
I know.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's probably the one.
Why did that make such a big impact?
I don't know. I don't know. It hooked me when I was 10. It's a series of 5 books. And my mom read them to me first and I kept reading them. And now I didn't find until a few years ago, there's a whole cult following. There's a group on Facebook and Robert McFarlane is a pretty well-known writer. He made a radio show about 3 years ago. And that's amazing. But we read it. So The Dark is Rising is the second book in the series, and it takes place over the 12 days of Christmas. So it starts on Midwinter's Eve. And so there's every year a paced readathon that goes along with the dates. So chapter 1 is read on this date, chapter 2 on this date, chapter 3 and 4 read on this days over the winter holidays. And so thousands of people all over the world read these books at the same time every year, and it's magical. And then, so that keeps me going. But so this tattoo right here is the main character, Will Stanton, gets a burn on his arm in this shape in the book. So I got my burn too. So
wow. So you're all in.
I'm all in.
You are all in.
Oh man, I'm so in.
That's awesome.
But I'll name another book that has made a huge impact. So when I was 21, what started me on my whole direction in my career path was The Secret Life of the Unborn Child by Thomas Verney. And I was working in an infant room at a daycare. And I had been babysitting kids for years and years and years. And it just stunned me how these tiny 2-month-old, 3-month-old babies could have such vastly different personalities at so young. And I was like, how could they be so different? And my sister was adopted when she was 3 days old. She's older than me, not by much, but she's older than me. And my parents knew right from the get-go that mattered, and raised her knowing, like telling her she was adopted, she was chosen, she was picked, there's, whatever. But it has always mattered to her that she was adopted. And my mom heard Thomas Verney speak at a workshop and bought his book and read it. And when I was talking about how these little babies are so different, how do they come out being so different? My mom handed me his book, and I read it, and it just blew my mind how what happens in utero could have such an impact on our personalities, how we can remember what happens before we're born, how it can matter what happens before we're born. And so he talks about this new field called pre and perinatal psychology. And so I'm like, okay, I want to study that. Where can I study that? And there was no place teaching it. And so I was at Evergreen, where you can develop your own independent study contract. So I did. And I studied that my final year at Evergreen, and contracted with Thomas Verney to help me figure out, like, well, can you read the papers I write? Can you help me decide what books to read? And so he did. And then later, we're getting a little, that book made an impact on my life.
That was a good lead in.
Yeah.
Why did you think that you had this passion for kids and unborn and personalities, and why was like child psychology so interesting to you?
That's a really good question. I think, I come to believe now that what happens to us and how we are wounded drives us. Like it gives us a void in us that we seek to heal. We seek to do something about. And so we have a value and a void, and that drives us. And so in my learning about that, I think my sister was a huge impact. There were periods of time in my life where I hated her guts because of her stuff that she was going through impacted me so greatly, that in a negative way. We're close now. It's all good, but boy, it was not good for a while. And I really sought to understand what was happening for her. And in my seeking, I looked towards me, and I did a lot of my own birth and prenatal healing. I discovered I was a twin. In the first trimester, my twin died, and that guided a lot of my own, like, I need to have a connection. I need to have a connection with somebody so great to fill this void that I have. And also how I was raised with so much play being of value. But that seeking to heal those early times, and I sought out the people that were doing that work. And so I did that for myself. And that was hugely impactful. And when I was doing that, what was the question? Why was this important?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was interesting. It felt right. And so I think, why is anything important to somebody? If you feel a spark and you go towards that.
Dylan, you mentioned play therapy before we went to the rapid fire questions, and two ignorant guys, or maybe just one. Maybe Stephen does know. Elaborate. What is play therapy? Define that for the audience, the listeners.
Yeah. So play. You might have heard Mr. Rogers quote, "Play is the language of children." I think it's the language that any of us can use to access wounds that are hard to integrate and hard to access. When we have, so a little brain education, our thinking brain is when we are connected in our thinking brain, connected to ourselves, feeling safe in a place where we can think logically, feel grounded, feel present, feel mindful. We're in this part of our brain. When we're playful, we can roughhouse, we can get that thrill, we can do, like fun stuff. That's when we also are bringing in some fight or flight stuff, fight or flight mixed with connected. When that happens, we can also bring in some activation, which is some of that fight or flight, right? We can also do some of that other part of the brain that is the collapse immobilization with the comforted brain. Collapse immobilization, when it's mixed with connected, looks like cuddling or, soft and cozy. That's safety mixed with activation. Both of those are play. So in play therapy, if a kid is playing, they're bringing up whatever is still not integrated from an event that happened that might have been traumatic or might have been stressful that didn't get integrated. And when I say integrated, I mean, if something is too big for our system to process, it stays outside of the range of being able to be processed. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And when it's not been processed, it means that anything that comes in our range of, comes in our lives and it triggers a memory or triggers a thought, that event, if it reminds us of that event, it's going to trigger that fight or flight response. Like you're going to need to protect yourself from it. So if it's not integrated. So like, let's say somebody yells at you or somebody hits you or somebody does something harmful. If that's not been integrated, that's going to be floating around in that non-integrated, it's not been processed yet. So then if you're playing and you're playing with swords or, like, let's just say swords. You're having a sword fight.
We sword fight quite a bit.
Sword fight. Yeah. Okay. So you're playing sword fight. That's going to bring up maybe that unintegrated threat of harm. So, but it's playful.
Right.
So, you're in a safe place and it's play. So you've got that, that spot where you're safe. So it's okay. It's not going to be flooded with somebody else coming at you. You're safe. So you're not flooded. Does that make sense? Flooded? Okay.
Oh, go keep going.
So
you're rolling.
So you can bring that up and sort of start integrating it. In therapy with a therapist, with me, the way I do it, synergetic therapy is one style. It's the style I do. I'm attuning with a kid, attuning to their nervous system and their activation. So I'm feeling their activation and I co-regulate with it. So let's say a kid is coming at me with a sword. I'm going to feel their fear, not their anger, coming at me with a sword. I'm going to go, oh, that's scary. I don't know how to protect myself. And I'm going to regulate. So I feel fear and I'm going to regulate. So regulating my nervous system teaches their nervous system how to regulate. That's going to help their nervous system start to process what happened to them. And so their nervous system at a below conscious level, because just like yawning, nervous systems interact with each other at a below conscious level whenever we're in a room together. So that starts to help their nervous system start processing an event that might not have integrated before. So through play, that event might start to give them permission to turn towards an uncomfortable thing so they can start to process it. So that next time, hopefully it's not next time somebody yells at them, but if they have more capacity so that they can breathe, if somebody's like, reminds them something on a TV show, somebody's yelling at somebody, instead of reacting and getting all upset, they breathe and they go, because that's what they've been taught to do.
Interesting. So have you found this or believe this to be more effective than like a psychotherapy where somebody sits on the couch, and obviously kids aren't great talkers, maybe most of the time.
Some are.
So you're saying like at a subconscious level, they can heal from things where they maybe wouldn't if they were just communicating
it's
and
actually
working with a therapist.
Much more effective, because a lot of people will say, okay, so when you're feeling really, really scared, take deep breaths. You can count and breathe in and breathe out and breathe in. But what that's doing is they're teaching this part of your brain.
Sure.
But when you're scared, you're in this part of your brain.
Right.
And this part of the brain is offline. And so when you get really scared, you're not thinking breathing. You're thinking, oh, something's happening. But if you teach this part of the brain, which is active when you're in a sword fight, you're teaching breathe.
Is that, maybe I'm off here, but like as an adult, is that why, hey, at the end of the day or stressful season, when I go for a run or hop on the treadmill and am active, it seems that in those instances, I'm able to think clearly, decompress, breathe, and process the stress and weight of whatever I'm carrying. It seems like it's easier when I'm active.
Probably.
Is that?
Yeah, because you're breathing.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing this as like a private practice, and what have been some of the cooler results and responses that you've seen from some of your, I don't know if you call them patients, but some of the people
I call them clients. I call them kids mostly.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. That's what I wanted to say. The kids.
What age range do you work with?
So I work with all ages. Mostly the kids that come to see me are between 4 and 10-ish, but I have some teens that come, and I have worked with toddlers. I had one toddler that had been in an incredibly traumatic situation down in the Bitterroot, and he came up, and it was a very intensive thing. I saw him every day for 3 weeks, and he was done.
Yeah. Like Stephen asked, what are some of those success stories or cool things you've
I don't want to get too specific about that one because that would be identifiable.
Okay.
But first of all, how long I've been doing it is a little two-parter. So I got my first master's in 2003. And that was in a really unique and progressive school that had just opened up to specifically teach a marriage and family therapy course, clinical psychology, through the lens of pre and perinatal psychology. So it was brand new. We had amazing teachers like Peter Levine. I don't know if you know who that is, but he teaches somatic experiencing. He's the creator of somatic experiencing, which is a really hot way of teaching in the body trauma from an in the body perspective. And Stan Groff he did a lot of LSD studies before LSD became illegal, and was actually one of the pioneers of learning that people carry birth memories and prenatal memories. And Tom Verney was one of our teachers, and David Chamberlain was another one who does a landmark study on birth memories, and like just some amazing people that they pulled in. And I was in the first class of people in that school. And it was like licensure courses for MFT, marriage and family therapy. And it was California board approved, but you have to have a graduating class before you can start the accreditation process. And I was in the first graduating class, and I lived in Washington, and I traveled down once a month to California for our 5 days of can till can't classes. And then I graduated, and I moved to Canada with my daughter for 4 years. And then when I came back to Washington, I started getting my 3,000 of supervised hours. And when I finished getting my hours was the year the school closed because of low enrollment. So I was screwed because I couldn't get licensed in Washington. They would not recognize the school, even though it was California board approved. All my friends living in California could get licensed and everything, and I couldn't. But Washington has a lesser credential called certified counselor that I could get as long as I always had outside supervision. I could still work. I could work in private practice, and I worked in a crisis agency for children and adults who are victims of trauma and abuse and crime. And I did play therapy there. I learned a lot of what I do now. It was a very, very progressive program. We learned a lot of relational neuroscience, a lot of early brain development, and how trauma affects early brain development in the early 2000s, before it was hot, like before Bessel van der Kolk wrote his book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is what everybody yells about. And I don't even like that book that much. But no offense to people who love that book. There's better books. But like I learned infant and child-centered play therapy. And a lot of what we learned was through what I do, is just like really feeling into what we feel. But I didn't have the language for what I was doing. I just instinctively knew how to be with people. And I had done so much of my own deep healing. A lot of that program was our own parallel process, our own healing, along with learning the academic stuff. So it was kind of like we would do a lot of our own work, do our academic stuff, come home, recover from doing our own really deep, intense process work. Maybe if we have time, we'd do our papers and then go back and do some more. It was really intense. And we learned a lot, and it was an amazing program, and I couldn't get licensed from it, and it sucked. So I worked in Washington for 10 years. And then I was in, well, less than that, nine years. I had a private practice part-time, and I worked part-time in that crisis agency. And then the crisis agency was fairly corrupt. The management was not great. And there was a lot of unprofessional and unethical things going on. Me and the other therapists were trying really hard to level up their ethics and professionals. And one of the therapists left before she got fired because she could feel it coming. Other therapists got fired. I got fired when I called out some of the unprofessional ethics. It was incredibly traumatic for me. They made me leave before I could tell my clients I was leaving. I had a client attempt suicide after I left. I found out later. So I don't want to cry. It was really, really hard. I had a kid that I had just told the week before that she seemed like she had met goals, and we were going to talk about how to terminate, that's the clinical word for ending therapy, that she was ready to be done with therapy. And I never saw her again. And for a little kid who's 8 years old, that's abandonment, and it's unethical. And that agency had no idea what they were doing. The therapists were the highest educated people in that agency, and they didn't know how to manage what they were doing. And so I went into a career crisis. I tried to do parent coaching instead for a while, and that didn't go well. At the time, I was a member of our Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in East Wenatchee, and they held me up. They gave me a job as the director of religious education. So I was managing volunteers and training volunteers and did the storytelling. And I learned that I could do that. I didn't know that I was a manager of anything or I could do that, but I had leadership qualities, and it was very, very part-time and didn't pay very well. But I loved them so much, and I got my social action on. Because I don't know if you know anything about Unitarian Universalism, but it's basically a social action church. It's not really a church. It's not Christian. It's believe whatever you want to believe, and we'll support you in your spiritual search. And also we are social activists. And so I did that, and I was broken. So it was really hard. And in those years, I also met my husband, so that was good. That was a good part of all that. Wonderful. He's great. And then we were struggling so much financially. My mom had left me her house, so we were house rich and cash poor. It was a big 4-bedroom house with a big 25,000 gallon pool in the backyard, which is wonderful, except there was so much smoke all the time we couldn't use it. My husband was newly sober and found his passion for photography again, and had a business that wasn't really bringing in money. And we were just talking one day, and he just said something about finishing his bachelor's degree, and there's no place in Wenatchee to do that. And I just said, well, do you want to finish your bachelor's? And he just lit up like a Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, where do you want to go? And he's like, well, my sister's getting her BFA at Missoula at UM. I'm like, well, do you want to move? And we just said, okay, let's go.
Wow.
So within 6 months, our house sold for 20 grand over asking, and we were here.
Wow. There's a lot there. I mean, very deep. I imagine your job is equally hard and equally rewarding. Very different from day to day or situation. And so just thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that with us. As we wrap up here, I have one last question, then I'll let Stephen wrap us up. Question I often ask, and a question I really enjoy. Dylan, if on Reserve Street there was a billboard where you could just speak one thing, one short message to everybody who passes by, to all of Missoula, what would you say?
Can it be small print?
Sure.
What a great answer.
Kids are people too. They need respect. Let them play. Let them play. Get out of their way. Stop supervising them all the time. Treat them with respect. I'm a big fan of risky play, so that's not necessarily have to be on the billboard, but yeah, they need to be.
Let them play.
Let them play.
It's a good place to end.
Yeah.
Dylan, thank you for your work with the kids and your heart and your love. I can see that you're just a very compassionate, empathetic person. So thank you for your work you're doing.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dylan.